Here's how to create your very own graphing calculator in JavaScript in 20 lines of code. It may not be just as advanced as Desmo's, which is the world's foremost graphing calculator website, but it will certainly do the trick. Do you want to make this? The best part is it only requires a basic knowledge of JavaScript, and you can do it in a really short amount of time. Basically, it requires zero work. Let's get straight into it. First of all, you're going to want to open Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a very prominent coding IDE, and it's great for any programming language, especially HTML, JavaScript, CSS. The CSS is the least important part. You can pretty much forget about that file. Before starting any actual programming, you're going to want to link a script here. Next, you want to go to GitHub and search up cloud9.js and scroll down until you see the one by Dark Shadow Official. Now, what is cloud9.js? Cloud9.js is as you can see here, it's a flexible video game and 2D graphics framework for JavaScript. It does all the work for you, and all you need to do is do a little bit of coding. And this is what we're going to be using for the bulk of our work. Now, we just go to cloud9.js, copy the raw file, make sure it says copied. Then let's just create a new file, call it cloud9.js, copy paste the code. Let's link cloud9.js up in the head of the document. Let's get straight to it. Now, the first thing we want to do for our graphing calculator is initialize the cloud. We can do that very easily by just that. Now, if we want a graphing calculator, see, Cloud9 is mainly built for motion simulations and video games, but there's an additional feature that allows you to make it so that when you have an object moving across the screen, it doesn't clear the screen repeatedly, which basically means that it can draw. So all we have to do to activate that is click false. It is type in false as the parameter. Now this defaults to true. Next, what we want to do, let's create some of our constants here. Let's set that to 1 for now. We also want our Y scale here. Next, what we want to do, let's initialize the screen, which is very easy. We just have to initialize the screen like that. And let's go 500 by 500. The background is automatically set to white, but there's an optional parameter here to set it to a different color. I'm going to leave it as white for now. Next, let's get straight to it then. So to create a new object, we're going to create a character class. Now, the difference between creating a character class and a character, creating a character creates one singular character or object that you can play with. It's essentially one specific thing that you want to keep throughout your game. But character classes are used for mass producing objects in your game. But in this case, we're going to be using it for the graph. So let's call it a graph. The name of the class is graph. And for the draw function, we always have to pass in vars as a parameter. And to draw it, we're going to want to go first, we want to draw the basic x and y axis. So start coordinates, cloud.c.width/2. Let's draw the x-axis now. Perfect, that's our x and y axis. Now, here's the part where we draw the point. So how we're going to do this it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to take a point, and then based on the equation of the graph, we just move it along that equation and just draw 100 different tiny lines, and it'll all look like a smooth curve or line. It'll be very simple. Cloud.line x bars.old x. So we're going to create a variable for that later. Bars.old y vars.x. Now vars.x and vars.y is basics default parameters. Anyways, let's go on to our behavior function. This is where things get a little tricky, but not that tricky. So once again, it requires vars to be a parameter. Now vars is going to be the variables of a specific character. You'll understand. So first what we want to do, we want to set old x to be the new x, so it doesn't just keep drawing a bunch of lines from one point. So we can have that. Then what we want to do, so it'll just move really fast, because JavaScript is a fast framework, but if we make it 1, it'll take a lot more time. So 5, let's try 5, and we can modify it from there depending on how choppy the curve is. Next, this is where the actual work comes in. We're going to want to set vars.y to equal. Now, an important thing to note about canvases, when you're drawing a point, a y of 0 is at the top of the graph instead of the bottom. So when we're drawing our point, so our 0, 0 coordinate is going to be at the center of the graph. So we're going to want to subtract our result from 250 essentially to get it where we actually want it to be. Now here we're going to go vars.graph. We're going to get to that as well. Now graph is going to be the equation that does all the work. Now next we want to do vars.x subtract 250 from it, or half the length of the screen so that we can center it, and then we'll just divide it by y scale. Very simple. We can modify it in case I got one of my operations wrong, but it's not going to be that big of a deal. Now let's set x to be equal to -1, y -1, old x, we have to set that as well, old y, and then, oh, one more thing. In Desmos, it automatically creates random colors, so let's do that here. Let's set the color of the graph to be equal to vars.color so that we're not accidentally like making it all the same color and not being able to differentiate it. Next, all we have to do is let's create a function called graph. And you just have to pass in the equation function, which will lead to cloud.create character from class. Now this is where it comes in handy. Now we just have to pass in graph, and then specific vars we set graph to equation function, and color, let's just set it to a random color. And now let's create our animate function, and that's just going to be cloud.runAll. Now cloud.runAll versus cloud.runCharacter. Cloud.runCharacter is a lot less useful, but it has its uses in certain cases where you just want to run one specific character, versus cloud.runAll runs everything. which makes it a lot more convenient because you don't have to pass in any specific IDs. It just automatically handles everything for you. Now we just go request animation frame, animate, and then we can just call animate. Now, first we actually have to graph a function though. So let's go graph x y equals x squared. So that's what we're going to be using. Now, all of this was done with very basic, limited JavaScript knowledge. Now let's test it out, and we can modify any issues from there. Yep, perfect. As you can see, it drew the curve pretty well. Now let's modify some stuff. Let's zoom in on the origin. So to zoom in, you want to make X scale smaller. So let's go. Now, if you want the correct scale, like 1:1 X to Y ratio, then you're going to want to make sure they're equal. Now let's test this out. As you can see, I must have messed up one of the operations. This should probably be that. Oh, wait. I put the thing in the wrong place. Apologies. Apologies. Yes, there we go. Now, as you can see, it's a perfect graph. Now, what if we want to graph two things at the same time? Like, let's say we want to graph the x cubed function. It will do it all at the same time, and we can see where they intersect as well. 0, 0, and 1, 1, I believe that is. Yes, 1, 1. Now, what if we want to graph a different function, like... Yep, does it perfectly. This is probably going to be very useful, and as you can see, if we just ignore the fact that these two functions are there, we've done this in only 22 lines of code. 22 lines of code for a relatively advanced graphing calculator, and it's very easy to visualize as well. Now let's try the bell curve. Yep, perfect. You can play around with this all you want, but this is going to be a very fun project to show your friends, and it's done in an extremely small amount of code. Now, other than the fact that this is a pretty good graphing calculator, another point of this video was for showing Cloud9.js. Cloud9.js is a library I actually built. Cloud9.js is extremely good if you want to create a very simple game for all sorts of purposes. You can even build simulations, which is going to be extremely easy. You don't even need all of this. You can probably do this in 20 lines of code. But yes, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you really like this library and project, and make sure to subscribe and all that. I will see you all next time. Thank you very much for watching. One more thing. As you can see, over here we have this small line completely ruining the graph, but there's a very easy fix for it. Let's create a quick variable called count, and we'll set that to 0, and then we'll just increase the count. Now, this is caused because when we originally set it to -1, -1, -1, -1, it starts from that point, but it also draws the line from that point. So this is a very easy fix. We'll just go if count is more than 2, it can't be more than 1 because then it'll still show it. Then we'll just draw the line, and if not, we'll do nothing, so void 0. And yep, easy fix. Let's check it now. Ah, vars.count. That was my bad. Yes, vars.count. And as you can see, that line is gone and we're all good. Thank you very much for watching once again, and I hope you enjoyed